for Mr. Bond. The Bond. All right, sir. Before I have given him the book because I did want him to read a bit from it, but it has a very curious title, Lone Fox Dancing. So why is this fox lone and where has it been dancing all this while?
Well, I apologize for the title, but first, thank you for your wonderful reception. Thank you. And for your kind words, Soumya. The title, I have to apologize for the title because, as you can probably guess, I don't have the figure of a fox, a lean fox or a lone fox. Perhaps lone wolf would have been better. But still, it sort of indicated a certain individuality or a longing when I was younger to be out on my own, to be in the wilderness or sometimes in lonely places. And that isolation gave me very often the inspiration for stories and things I wrote. But I'm no longer a lone fox. I have a large adopted family looking after me, and not the recluse that people imagine me to be. So if you do ever come up to the hills, you certainly can meet me at the bookshop, or if on the hillside even. And here I am. I've taken 83 years to visit Bhopal. Sorry. I think it's far too long. I think if I had started walking when I was a small boy, I might have got here by now on foot. But it's been a hurried journey, but one that's well worthwhile, and I hope I can come again before it's too late. Thank you.
How wonderful. How did you find the city of Bhopal before I go to my next question?
Well, I haven't been here long enough. You can't really get to know a place until you've lived there for some time. But the first impressions are of friendliness, a certain greenery around me, and the promise of good things to come if I come again.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. And moving forward, anyone who's read Mr. Bond's work, and we know all of us really have, there is a lot of, sparkle of autobiographical elements. And someone who's read the entire corpus of your work can also go ahead and hazard piecing your entire life story together. We do believe we know a lot about Rusty and about Mr. Bond. What are the new things one can look forward to specifically in this biography?
Well, I have written memoirs before, shorter ones, which have usually dealt with my boyhood and the early days of my writing life. So this really brings it up to date. Actually, it covers most of my life I've been writing now for about 65 years, from the year I left school, in fact. And so perhaps it would help young writers, and those of you who, not necessarily young, but who are also launching into writing careers or want to write books, and a great many people who do now, it could be of some help in maybe providing guideposts along the way. And maybe it's there also to let you know that you don't have to be discouraged, because there are ups and downs, and I've had as many difficulties as any young writer, but they can be overcome if you persevere, and if you work hard, and if you have confidence in yourselves.
I have a great many questions to ask you, sir. I don't know how many I'll be done with today, but let's begin with pig-headedness. What we do know is that you're a recluse, but you have a large family. You live in solitude in a place of your own. What are the qualities that keep you alive, keep you going in this pursuit of being a writer loved by generations and generations and generations?
I guess for one thing, a commitment to the written word, put it that way. Even before I left school, and this would interest the younger members of our audience, I had more or less determined that I was going to be a writer. One reason being that apart from playing football, I wasn't much good at science or mathematics. And other careers didn't really interest me. But I knew and soon discovered that writing wasn't going to be an easy profession to take up, at least not in those days. And when I came home from finishing school that winter many years back, and my mother asked me, "Well, Ruskin, what are you going to do with yourself?" And I said, "Mom, I think I'm going to be a writer." She said, "Don't be silly, go and join the army." In those days, the army was in fact the first choice of boys coming out of school. I think the army was much better off without me. I'd have been another Beetle Bailey. So I think the world was a safer place without me carrying a gun around. So those early days of writing and of struggling to get established, we can dwell on as we go along.
All right. One more question about the biography, sir. The process of writing helps us discover so much about our own self, and more so the process of putting together a biography in such meticulous detail. So while there's a lot new stuff for us to gorge on from this book, were there any revelations for your own self when you were piecing together your entire life through this book?
Well, I try to be honest with myself, but I guess nobody ever tells the entire truth, and certainly writers don't. They get so used to writing fiction that they become terrible liars. And so I had to really restrain myself sometimes by getting carried away or maybe exaggerating a particular incident. So I've tried to be honest with myself and describe my feelings as a boy when I lost a father, had to adjust to a different family situation, go abroad, and then, because I didn't have much money, work in an office for a living, and do all this, keeping in mind that whenever I had the opportunity, I would sit down and write something, whether it a story or a poem or the beginnings of my first novel. So I've never, I think in all my life, I will honestly say that I don't think more than 2 or 3 days have passed when I haven't written something. So in those 65 years, I think something or the other has gone down on my writing pad.
Excellent. That's a learning for most of us trying to be writers. Sir has maintained a meticulous journal throughout his life, from where are drawn in observations woven into the stories. Has the act of journal writing really supported your writing in a big way?
Yes, it has. In fact, that very first novel was based on a journal I'd kept during my last year in India. And when I found myself in the UK, age 17, very homesick for India, missing my friends, missing the town I'd grown up in, I had this journal beside me and I turned it into a novel. In fact, took the advice of an editor and who said it was an interesting journal, but they couldn't publish it as such. So why not turn it into a novel? And since I could write, I'd grown up on books, and that's something we can come to next. The influence of books on a young writer.
Right. In fact, that was going to be my very next question when you said that your biography, you do hope, in some way it managed to inspire, guide, mentor younger writers. I do know you've been a fan of Dickens, and not just for your writings, but for your life as well. Could you throw some light on the influence of Dickens in particular in your life?
Yes, I think I must have been 12 when I read David Copperfield. That's Dickens' most autobiographical novel, and in which he, as a small boy, runs away from home and later grows up and becomes a writer. So in order to emulate him, I decided it would be a great thing to run away from home, which I did for a couple of days and didn't take enough pocket money with me. So I came back and asked my mother, is lunch ready? So, for those who like to run away from home, I would suggest you think twice about it. And if you're going to be writers, think twice about it too, because it's not an easy profession. But once committed to writing, I never really gave up. And so those early years and the very frustrating time getting my first novel published, I meet young writers who feel that they're getting a hard deal and publishers are not appreciating what they write. But that's always been the case, not just with me, it's been the case with many famous writers, that they have not really been appreciated for many years, and then suddenly the public discovers them. Well, you've only discovered me in the last 10 years, because for the 50 years before that, nobody was buying my books.
All right, I wonder what had happened to us then. I have been reading you for more than a decade, Mr. Bond, definitely. But other than Dickens, because this is something that is very well known to people who read about you and who've researched on you, other than Dickens, who are the other literary figures that you have been very influenced by and that younger authors can look up to if they are seriously thinking of making a career in writing?
I think every writer of any stature, when questioned, would admit to having been a great reader as a boy. I don't know many writers who were not enthusiastic readers. And I think in my case, it was that. I grew up on books and I wanted to emulate my favorite writers, whether they were Dickens or Somerset Maugham or P.G. Wodehouse or Agatha Christie, and I read all kinds of books. No, I read comics too. So, I mean, I think you can read everything and then sift through it, and you will discover what suits you best. And so all these writers actually have been there in the past. I still go back to them and discover new writers too. So I think without a love of books, you won't have the urge to write books.
Right, wonderful. Thank you. And some sound advice for all of us, both for wanting to write and both for wanting to run away from home. I hope we are taking very active notes throughout this session. And moving on, I'm recalling everything that I've read, and my mind is in a jumble right now. I do remember reading these lines in one of your books that, "Live long, my friend, be wise and strong, but do not take away from any man his song." And I have loved these, and I remember this was scribbled somewhere in my diary. And you have written some brilliant poetry as well, but not enough.
That's
Why?
true. Yes, you're right. I feel I should be writing more poetry. Publishers don't encourage the writing of poetry because, you see, publishing is a business, and publishers very naturally want their books to sell. And books of poetry don't usually sell very well. So I think you have to be very brave to be a poet in a way. I knew a poet in London who used to bring out a little magazine, and he would actually go out on the street and sell it himself, almost force it on passers-by. So everyone, I meet a tremendous number of people, boys and girls, who like to write poetry, but they don't always read it. So I think you have to have a love of poetry and of the music in poetry, the rhythm, and also the feeling of being a poet, which is a little different from being a novelist or being even a non-fiction writer.
May I just, I just want to interrupt you there and ask you to explain this a bit. How is the feeling of being a poet different from writing prose?
When you're writing a story or a novel, in a way you're to some extent detached, I think. But where you're writing a poem, you're immersed totally in it, both mentally and emotionally. Some poets are poets of feeling, and others maybe are mental poets, who use their thoughts to express themselves in words. So, and it's also a love of words and using them in a, you could say, almost a musical way.
One more question before we add an element to our session for the day is that, like you mentioned, you've been writing for 65 years. So probably when you started writing, the generation that read you then, now their kids and perhaps their kids are reading your books. I just had a little one walk up to me before this session carrying your book saying that, ma'am, I really wanted an autograph. And I said, I'll see how I manage that. But 65 years is a huge landscape by any measure. How have you seen writing and reading, more specifically, evolve in this decade and more, in this half a century and more?
Well, certainly more people are reading my books and stories now than they did 40, 50, 60 years ago. And there are various reasons for that. It's not that I'm a better writer. Certainly there are more readers around in spite of all the rival diversions that you can get from the internet and from, say, video games or from television, which were things that we never had when we were young. For one thing, there are more, one reason why there are more readers is it's largely because there are more, quite simply, educated people around. You see, reading was always a minority pastime. Back when I was a schoolboy and in a class of, say, 35 boys, there were just 2 or 3 of us who were fond of reading, who actually, everyone had to take a book off the library shelf and it was usually returned unread. But so there were just 2 or 3 of us who were actually fond of books and fond of reading. And in those days there was no television, there was none of the things we blame now. You could go to the cinema maybe once a month, or you could read comics or listen to the radio, and that was it. And reading today is still a minority pastime. But that 3 out of 30, in terms of actual numbers, because of the tremendous increase in education, hundreds, thousands of schools all over the country, English medium schools, Hindi medium schools, all kinds of schools, compared to 50, 60 years ago when you could count schools on, in terms of 20 or 30 good schools, and now there are hundreds. So that small minority of readers, in terms of actual numbers, is huge now. So whereas it was difficult in the 1960s or 70s for a publisher to sell one of my books, I could take any title at random, early books, that book today is selling in hundreds of thousands, and they would hardly have sold 200 or 300 then.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I finished with my first round of questioning, and I do want you to give a huge round of applause to Sir for engaging in such great depth about some curious questions in the mind of a fan. And I need an extra chair here on the stage with me because I'm going to invite Mr. Vikas Singh. So my first question to you is not so much about reading as about traveling. So you have been an ardent traveler. And before I ask this to Sir, I want to know from you, what is it about the twin towns of Mussoorie and Landor that such great literature just keeps popping out of there?
See, if you look, apart from Dublin, which has the highest density of writers anywhere in the world, Mussoorie and Landor has a very rich heritage as far as literary tradition is considered. The first Australian novelist, John Lang, he spent a considerable amount of time in Mussoorie and he wrote extensively about India. John Masters was there in Mussoorie. Anita Desai was born in Mussoorie. In fact, the first Agatha Christie mystery, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, was actually based on a murder that happened in Hotel Savoy. Rahul Sanskrityayan had a connection with Mussoorie and he wrote so much about Tibet. In the modern times, if you see India's first travel writers, Hugh and Colin Ganzar, they are from Mussoorie. Ganesh Saili is from Mussoorie. Bill Atkin is from Mussoorie. So my advice to all budding writers are that if you want to be successful,
don't go to Mussoorie.
Please don't crowd Mussoorie, though.
Don't put me out of business, please.
More than writers, like I use this word in the introduction, I'll use it again. For a lot of us, it's like a pilgrimage. whether we are standing outside the Cambridge bookstore on Saturday, 3 to 4 p.m., if I'm not wrong, and if one of those occasions, sir, doesn't arrive, for whatever reasons, for health reasons, we are so disappointed. But I think all of us also go to Landor just to see from outside where does Mr. Bond live, as if that's going to give us some magical inspiration and turn us into great writers ourselves. But I'll put the same question to you, sir. Did you know that you'll be in Landor and you'll become a successful writer?
No, I imagined myself actually being a successful writer, yes, but in no particular place. After all, you can't be a writer in just one place. Your readership has to come from all over the country. And so you have to belong to India, not just to Missouri or Landor.
Wonderful to know. Vikas, I'll ask you a quick question. I was chatting with him before the session, and Vikas, obviously, because he's researched on Mr. Bond, knows a lot more about him than few of us can aspire to. So the connect between you to T. Kunozhia, and there's some connect between Ruskin Bond, sir, and tea. And I don't know what that is, but you put me at it. So can you tell the audience, what is that?
Yeah, see, his father, after he finished his training in teaching from Lovedale, he spent a considerable amount of time at a tea estate in Travancore, Cochin back then. And in those days, to work in a tea estate, you first had to, work in UK. And then they would transfer you here. So he spent some time in UK, then he came back in India, joined this tea estate, worked for some time in Cochin. And then obviously he went on to teach in Jamnagar. And the rest, obviously, he has talked about a lot in his books.
Right. Are you still a tea person, Mr. Bond, or do you prefer coffee now?
No, tea, I've got mixed feelings about tea because many years ago there was this famous actress called Brooke Shields. And she asked her to marry me and she said she didn't want to be called Brooke Bond, so she got out of that. Thank you very much. So it all fell apart, I'm afraid.
That tea question was worth it just because of this comment. So again, we are mentioning about your fan and your following in great detail, and I have a question about that to Vikas. But before that, sir, what have been the most heartwarming moments of fans and readers engaging with you?
Oh, that's so hard to say, but it's always nice when a small girl or boy comes up to me and says, she's enjoyed a story of mine, or he's enjoyed it. And sometimes I get very useful criticism too from young readers. I had a 10-year-old girl come up to me and say, "Sir, I like your ghost stories, but they're not scary enough. She says, can't you make them more frightening?" And I realized that it's much harder to scare children nowadays than it was 50 years back.
Right. So we all know about it. We've read it in your biographies about your very challenging childhood. And yet you fill our childhoods with such bright stories and bright laughters and the fear and ghosts. And you give us such a lovely experience when you take us into the world of literature for children. How does your childhood combine with your writing to bring out such engaging stories for children?
Yes, I think childhood does play an important part in a writer's life. If you look at many great writers, Dickens and others, they did have difficult childhoods, and it certainly influenced their writing. Also, it makes you more sensitive to the childhood of others if you had a difficult childhood. So while I often wrote about my own childhood, as I grew older, I found myself writing more and more about other people's childhoods, about other children, and in stories like The Blue Umbrella or Angry River. And so I think childhood plays an important part in the work of many writers. If you look at Tagore's plays and poems, so much of it is about childhood. The Post Office or The Crescent Moon, and then actually, Dickens's most memorable novels are those in which he describes childhood. It's either David Copperfield's boyhood, or Oliver Twist and all that he goes through, or Pip in Great Expectations, or Little Nell in the Old Curiosity Shop. It's really the children who bring his books to life. And that's the case too with many other writers.
Right. You'd never met your grandfather, and yet you could conjure him so vividly in your stories. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, that's right. People often ask me that, or comment on the fact that I must have had a very interesting and lively childhood in the company of my grandfather. Well, both my grandfathers actually died before I was born. So grandfathers are invented. You see, I'm a fiction writer, so you have to invent people sometimes. But if you invent them convincingly enough, then people will think they really existed. And now I'm beginning to think maybe they did exist and I knew them. So sometimes you even convince yourself.
Absolutely. And so convincing is Mr. Bond's act and power over writing that not only did I believe that your grandfathers existed, I kept your grandmother in the image in which she's been projected in your stories. And when I read The Lone Fox Dancing, I was in for a shock, right?
Yes, because my granny was, I didn't know her very well, but she was a rather strict person who didn't like children talking out of turn and no second helpings at meals. And if she actually punished you if you were if you made trouble.
Right. Now, because giving Mr. Bond some rest and talking to you, you arguably have the largest collection of Mr. Bond's book. You also run this fan page, I think, for Mr. Bond, which has over 18,000 followers. That's a huge number. And I have not yet asked you, what holds you to his writings? What is it that you find so engaging, so special about Mr. Bond's writing?
See, I first read him when I was in class 8. A lot of students who were there in ICC, those days, there used to be a book called 12 Modern Short Stories. And one of them had a story that, has continued to haunt me all this time. It was Night Train at Deoli. And all of you, anybody who has read, as you grow old and each year you read that story, you will find some facet which would not have hit you when you would have read it for the first time. And since you're asking, I would have read all his books. A lot of them I have in my collection as a first edition and stuff. But what is special about his writing is, there is a lot of innocence which you don't find nowadays, in the modern age writers, because it's become very materialistic, written for an audience which is more digital savvy, who does not have time. His books take you back to an era where people really had the luxury of time. So if you really want to transport yourself back in those days, then there's nothing better than reading his books.
Excellent. Absolutely. And a lot of us would echo your thoughts. And since you said that his books transport us to another time, I also believe that when I reflect upon the way Mr. Bond lives, I do believe you live in a time warp, because I was watching one of your interviews in which we were talking about your Twitter handle. And I was ecstatic when, this notification came on Twitter that Real Riskin Bond has joined Twitter. And later it was revealed that this was just done by the publishers.
That's right. And I think I've never done a single tweet or Twitter up to now.
Yes, some bit of heartbreak here for us. But given that digital is the next thing, how do you, and I really want to know from you because you live in a very traditional manner, how do you see it impacting readership and writing?
Oh, it certainly impacted readership, writing, publishing too, because now with you can read on your computer, you can read on Kindle, you can read ebooks. There are so many ways that you can read if you want to, and as long as you're reading, I'm quite happy with all these changes. Although I personally still prefer the printed book. That's because I'm used to it. Huh? And you will naturally also prefer what you're used to and what you've grown up with. So I think these things have in many ways helped, because you can now, in fact, buy a book or order it online. You don't have to go hunting for a bookshop, although I still personally enjoy browsing in a bookshop. So maybe I try to look, although I don't use technology, but I'm certainly don't discourage anybody else from using it. And I think it has its advantages too.
Right. So the reason I ask this question is, even if Mr. Bond is not using a lot of technology to engage with the readers, his fans definitely are, and people who love you definitely are. And Vikas, you have been working on a rather interesting project, which is about converting Mr. Bond's books into the graphic format to make it more reader savvy. So could you talk a little bit about that?
See, it's an age of rebooting books. You have to make books more user-friendly, more hep, because reading as a habit, if it has not picked up, has not declined but has stagnated. So a lot of his books are now getting translated, reformatted. So you now have, say for example, on the 60th anniversary of his book, Room on the Roof, you had an illustrated edition. So you had pictures and you had the novel. Elephants Can Remember, that's a story, so that's been completely transformed into a comic book format. We try to do something with Face in the Dark, which is quite a haunting story and a scary one. So getting that translated into a comic book format. Then what happens is you have illustrations and you have the story. So it just makes it more enjoyable, and the comic books are now getting converted into a graphic comic format. So I think that's where it's becoming easier and easier to connect with your readers.
Excellent. Mr. Bond, you've constantly talked about being very focused about wanting to be a writer, but I did read some trivia somewhere that you wanted to be a tap dancer earlier in life. Is that true?
Tap dancer, yes, but I don't have the figure for it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that question, I'm done with my initial list. I can ask more, but do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, we do.
Yes,
Can I ask one of my volunteers to run around and have the mics passed around?
Hello, I'm Ritambhara, and I just turned 18, and I've been reading Ruskin Bond since ages, and I'm so glad I got to see him. So my question is, most authors that we read, they have a particular genre that they write in, but Ruskin Bond, he has written sensualist on one hand, and he has written other great books and stories for children. So how does he manage to do that, and what does he have to say about it?
I didn't get all of it. Thank you. Yes, I've always been attracted to different genres of writing, and from school days, I was good at the essay, but then I thought I must try the short story, and the short story suited me. Short novels, but not long novels. I don't think I could write a very long novel. And this autobiography is probably as long as I can get. Poetry, I love writing poetry, although poems come from time to time, and not just when you want them to. So I guess it's just a love of words that makes you want to, and a love of using words in different ways, putting good sentences together and telling good stories, that you try different ways of actually communicating with the reader. It's all about communication in the long run.
Right. I will just ask a question there. In 65 years of writing, does one not exhaust ideas? How do newer and newer ideas keep coming to you?
Well, one does run out of ideas from time to time. So when, usually stories are about people and interesting people. But if you run out of people, I can write about animals. If I run out of animals, I write about aunts and uncles and eccentric relatives. And when I run out of them, I write ghost stories. You can always cook up a ghost or two.
So long as you're still in touch with life, you can find enough ideas to write about. All right. Can we have some more questions, please? Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hello. Namaskar. I'm Ashish Kolarkar and huge Bond fan. My generation grew reading R.K. Narayan's Malgudi Days and Bond books. So Vikas has, I think, rightly mentioned that in this age of bitterness, in the last 65 years, Mr. Bond kept the innocence and the child in him. So my question is how he kept that child intact in him.
Well, I guess that's just, I don't know, I have no idea how the child stays alive in me. I think it's something to do with dreams and dreaming. And in our dreams, we are all innocent people. And I have often been influenced by my dreams in my stories and in my writing. In fact, this very afternoon, this morning, I visited a school and on the way back, Vikas here said, tigers sometimes roam around in that area. And then after lunch, when I lay down to rest and I started dreaming, it may have been the effect of the koftas he gave me, but I dreamt of that I was being chased by a tiger, across the fields over here. So I think dreams often play a great part in these things.
गुड आफ्टरनून, मैं राजेश भदौरिया थिएटर डायरेक्टर हूँ भोपाल में. जस्ट वन क्वेश्चन. यू हैव मेंशन इन लेटेस्ट बायोग्राफी कि योर जनरल राइटिंग वर्क ऑन योर पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस. सो सर, व्हाट अबाउट महारानी?
Oh, that's more of an adult story. This was a person I'd known for many years, and I felt I ought to write about her. And it turned into a novel or a novella, which had a mixed. It's not a children's book by any means, but it had a mixed reception. And like most of my books and stories, it's still around. Over the years, some books are successful, others are neglected, and maybe I should just tell you a short anecdote of how about 30, 40 years back when it was very difficult to see my books in a bookshop, and I went into a bookshop in Delhi, and like any other hopeful author, I was looking around to see if my book was there on sale, but finally I found it right underneath a pile of bestsellers by Harold Robbins and Kushwant Singh and others. And I looked, was the bookseller looking? No. So I took it out from under the pile and put it on top so that people would see it. But he'd spotted me, the bookseller had spotted me. So he came, he didn't know I was the author. So he came up, he looked at the book, he said, "Ye nahi chalta," and he put it back underneath the pile. So to teach him a lesson, I bought it. So you end up buying your own books in the long run.
Hello, sir. Here stands Ankita, a huge Ruskin fan. This is not a question, it's just a product of my eagerness for reading your books and all. Sir, I want to ask if in near future ever you plan to write a collaboration with a newbie or a budding writer, what sort of content would you like to see in the qualification, that format or qualification excerpt that would be given to you?
You want to collaborate with me?
Yes, sir, I do.
There is a new partner.
Please, why not? Why not? Send me one of your stories. Huh?
Where should I, sir? And what should be the content like? I mean, that's my question basically.
But you can't all collaborate with me. I think it'll be very difficult.
Let's take this conversation offline. We will have this conversation. Let's take another question.
Sure, sir.
Okay, yes.
So I just wanted to ask a question that sometimes when you're in front of your paper, the idea and everything is in your head, but you just can't put it on the paper. Have you ever had that experience?
It occasionally happens, but sooner or later the word comes along, or you carry on writing, leave a blank, and maybe it'll come in later. So it's a form of writer's block, I suppose, which I think we all suffer from time to time. And what I do is, if I'm stuck halfway through a story or an article or a book, I put it aside and come back to it later on. And in the meantime, write something else.
Ruskin sir, I have read your book, that is Miss Gamla. Is it true?
Which one?
Miss Gamla.
Miss Kamla.
Miss Gamla. Oh, the old lady who fell into the canal.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. There was a lady who who was chasing these boys, and she fell into the canal in Dehradun when I was a boy. That's a true story, yes. So some of my stories are based on actual events and people I've known.
And the tiger ones which you took to the zoo and...
The tiger?
The tiger ones which you took to the zoo.
Yes, that's also a true story. But the one in which I was chased by a tiger, that I made up.
All right. Thank you for your questions, beta. There's a question here from a young boy. Do we have the mic? Yes, we have the mic.
Good morning, Ruskin sir. I'm Ayushman Sharma. And my question for you is, I want to be a writer when I grow up, like you. So what does it take to be a writer?
What does it take to be a writer? First, you must be a good reader. Secondly, you must be fond of language. And whatever language you want to write in, whether it's English or Hindi or any other language, you must love that language and respect it and want to use it in as beautiful a way as possible. So it's not just a question of wanting to see your name on a book or an article. You must really be fond of writing and fond of language, fond of literature. And all these things put together will help you to become a good writer.
Sir, my question is very general. It's about all the fields, not just writing. Of all the years you've been writing and the successful career you've had, I've seen a lot of successful people, and there have been people who have been either highly motivated or they have been obsessively driven about their work. And so, what do you think would be the difference between a person who's highly motivated and obsessively driven? And my question is that the people I've seen who have been obsessively driven about their work and they've worked so hard, they have lost on other aspects of life, like family, health and all. So is it necessary in your perception to be obsessively driven or highly motivated?
You don't have to be obsessive, but certainly motivated, and you have to be have a good sense of direction and know in what direction you want to go. And because you don't have to, if you're very obsessive, then disappointments can get you down, So you must enjoy your work, basically, I think. And if you enjoy it, you'll do good work. And certainly be motivated and have a good sense of direction.
I'm Sangeeta from Indore. I've come from Indore. I just wanted to ask that, do you follow the present-day authors, and which is your favorite author?
No, I don't have a particular favorite. I do dip into new writing from time to time so that I'm not totally ignorant. But my own preferences are for old favorites, for writers I've enjoyed down the years. But I like reading nowadays. In fact, I don't read as much fiction as I used to. I now read a lot of biography, history, and actually true accounts of people who've done interesting things.
So, be it Bhabhi Ji or your Aya or The Untouchable you wrote about, all your stories you make the readers fall in love with the characters. How do you manage that? Is it in real life, do you value people that much as you write about them?
Well, sometimes I do, but I'd love to fall in love with all of you, but it's difficult all at once, to be to love everybody all at once. You have to do it one by one.
Sir, I wanted to know what was your inspiration behind the poem Snail?
Snail. Oh, because I saw in that snail that sense of direction I mentioned and determination to get across the road in spite of all the traffic that was coming and going. And I think that snail had about 2% chances of getting across the road without being squashed by an oncoming vehicle. But because it was determined to do so, made the effort and finally succeeded against all odds.
Good evening, sir. So, when your childhood was not supportive to you, what were the idols that really inspired you to reach your destiny, to become a writer?
I think I wanted to, as I said earlier, emulate some of my own favorite writers. And it took hard work and perseverance. And so my advice to any of you who want to write and who might meet with disappointments later on, as you might well do, is never to despair, never give up. And if you do despair and get discouraged, still carry on working. Never despair, but if you do, work on in despair.
Right, never despair, but if you do, work on while in despair. On that note, I will have to end the open house.